I tell you how much I appreciate Sherry saying when he says something you really like, use these hashtags. There aren't any hashtags for things you don't like because we have no expectation of that happening. But I appreciate that, Sherry. Only those things that folks really like. I can't get started before I tell you how much I have enjoyed working with Sherry. You come out to the town hall meetings, you always have, even when it is a critical and constructively critical word, you always have a word of encouragement. Your heart is in a place of service, and I'm grateful to you for that. And I'm grateful to you all for coming out on a pleasant night too, for Pete's sakes. Lots of competing interests. These two guys with their names on the ballot, right? I mean, they knew what they were getting into, but you guys are doing this pro bono. And by pro bono, I mean, if you look at your weekly paycheck on Friday, you're going to see it's not pro bono. You're actually paid to be here tonight. So I'm glad you're here. I want to share with you some good news. Because I don't think we hear about it enough. Sherry and I were talking about that a little earlier. You come off of a big win like the Tea Party had in 2010, right? You come off upsetting the apple cart in a way that makes it the biggest turnover in modern congressional times. What do you do next, right? I mean, how do you really follow that up? And I talk to folks so often who are working so hard and they feel like they're not making a bit of difference whatsoever. And I'm just curious, is anybody in the hopeless is the wrong word for this crowd. Is anybody in the category of folks who say, you know, I don't know if we've made a difference, and maybe we're even moving backwards since 2010? I'm glad because this line that you see here is the kind of spending that Congress has control over. It's the discretionary spending. You know, about 2/3 of the federal budget's on autopilot. About 1/3 of the federal budget Congress gets to appropriate every year. So this is what I actually get to vote on. I need the president's signature to change the 2/3, but I can change the 1/3 by myself. And this is when President Obama came into office. He had a Democratic Congress. He was spending his stimulus money every single year. In the 3 years that I have had the pleasure of representing your voting card in Congress, every single year, 4 budget years, we have spent less the following year than we did the previous year. Now, if you haven't studied that, you're thinking, oh, Rob's talking about that funny Washington, D.C. math where if you only spend $5 extra instead of $10 extra, you call that a budget cut, right? We all know the funny math. This isn't the funny math. This is not inflation-adjusted math. These are actual George Washingtons going out the door. Well, Ben Franklin's going out the door in the case of the federal government. Spending fewer every single year. It has never happened. Right? 2010 upset the apple cart, turned out more congressmen, more turnover than ever before in modern American times. Never before has the federal government spent less 4 years in a row on congressional spending than it had on discretionary spending than it has the previous year. Now, if you're a budget-minded person, you are saying, yeah, but Rob, that's the discretionary spending side. We all know it's Medicare, it's Social Security, it's Medicaid, it's those mandatory programs where the cost curve is really moving. Can you help me, Sherry? Thank you.
Absolutely.
This is total federal spending. If anybody wants to claim baby boomer generation status, you know you are aging in to Medicare and Social Security at the rate of 10,000 people a day. 10,000 new men and women a day are claiming access to the benefits they've paid into their entire life. And yet, this is our total federal spending, including the 10,000 new men and women a day, $3.6 trillion in federal spending in 2011, 3.54 in 2012, 3.46 in 2013. We don't know where we're going to be yet for 2014. Again, never before happened. Not happened once, not happens every occasional decade, never before happened. And I say that to you because it didn't happen by accident. It happened because America sent a budget-minded class to Congress in 2010. Every congressional class, a little inside baseball for you, has its own personalities. You can imagine the men and women who were elected in 2002 or kind of a national security class, right? If you came in after 9/11, you ran because you were worried about America's freedom, you were worried about a terrorist attack. People running in 2010 at the height of the President's and Nancy Pelosi's spending had budget deficits and debt on their mind. This is a constituent-driven phenomenon. The reason that we're spending less year after year, the reason we're doing things that have never, ever, ever happened in the history of American economics is because of folks who care enough to show up on a Monday afternoon and try to make a difference. Sir?
Can you tell us what the revenues are that go with those?
Revenues are increasing every year. It's in 2011, there's a $1.3 trillion deficit, so 2.3 trillion. 2012 down to a $900 billion deficit, so it would have been 2.6. And then over in 2013, we're down to a $600 billion deficit, so 2.8. And that's not because, that's not true. Two reasons for that. Number one, the fiscal cliff deal that came about during the president's tenure raised taxes. I mean, that was the deal. It's I'm trying to think if I've ever gotten to vote on the bill I wanted to vote on in Congress, and the short answer is going to be no. Right? I get to vote on the bill that folks give you in Congress. The bill we had at the fiscal cliff, I voted no. I think you could have made the case to go either way. It kept the Bush tax cuts for 99% of Americans, gave up the Bush tax cuts for 1% of Americans. So it raised revenue. Strikingly, though, it turned into permanent tax law, tax cuts that even President Bush and a Republican Congress couldn't get passed. I want you to think about that. Think about how voters have changed this country. President Obama signed into law tax code changes that President Bush and Republican Speaker Denny Hastert and Republican leader, who would have been the Republican leader back in the day, out of Mississippi, Trent Lott, thank you very much. They could not get done. President Obama signed tax cuts that Bush and Republicans in Congress couldn't get done because the American people had so changed that conversation. So do celebrate this, because we've got lots of failures, right? Well, lots of failures we can talk about. I want you to think about the successes. These successes wouldn't be possible without you. Sherry, do one more. I want to talk immigration.
Yeah, go for it.
That's two more. This is the kind of math we do in Washington. I say one more, President says two more, compromising three more, right? That's not where we are. You can't read this. I'll just read it to you. What I want you to know is we have absolutely nothing to be ashamed of ever. Ever. Particularly when you come out of this part of the world. Who are the folks who are not my boss? Who's in Doug Collins' district north? Okay, folks to whom I have no responsibility whatsoever. Fantastic. There are so many issues that I see Republicans, conservatives embarrassed to talk about. And environmental issues are one of those, right? Oh, well, I do kind of want to pollute. No, you don't, right? Nobody cares more about the Chattahoochee River and Lake Lanier than we do, right? There's not one person at the EPA, not one person at Fish and Wildlife, not one person at the Corps of Engineers who cares more about Lake Lanier and Chattahoochee River than we do. We can lead on things because we're not embarrassed of who we are or what we believe. I put immigration reform in that category. And what I show here, because my guess is if we took a poll, folks in this room would believe two things. You'd believe, number one, that the media's message is that only the Senate wants to do something about immigration reform and the House does not because they're all evil Republicans. Number two, you'd believe that the reason the House doesn't want to do anything is because every time we try to make a deal with the Senate, we get outfoxed and outnegotiated, and so we don't want to do anything at all lest we be dragged down the wrong immigration path. What drives me so crazy is that issues that we need to work on are not immigration issues, but they show up under the category of immigration reform. The SAFE Act deals with border security. Border security is not an immigration issue. It is a human trafficking issue. It is a drug smuggling issue. It is an arms trade issue. Securing the border has nothing to do with how many workers you want in this country or which nations you want to open your doors to. It is a national security issue, and we give in to the other side when we let them characterize it as you just want to keep people out. Well, I do just want to keep people out, but not the immigration side of the conversation, the smuggler side of the conversation, and I'm not embarrassed about it even a little bit. Legal Workforce Act, right? These are serious issues. Reverend Bean, I'm going to go ahead and name you as the elder statesman here in this room. Now, if someone else wants to claim that title from Reverend Bean, you can claim it from him if you want to. But in our elder statesman's lifetime, never has there been a day, not once has there been a day, where we didn't rely on migrant labor to get crops out of the field in this great state of Georgia. Never one day in his lifetime. So if that's true, and unless someone has a good plan, now Reverend Bean's on the elder end of the, I'm looking for the young folks here, who's going to commit to having that family of 10 or 12 so we can procreate our way out of our labor shortage? Who's going to procreate their way out of it? You going to commit to having the 10 children, sir? Yeah. We need more, sir. We need more. More like you who are going to drive that.
I've got 5 brothers. We're ready.
Your family's doing its fair share. See, I came along in the time of population control when they said you're not allowed to have more than 2 kids because you're going to overpopulate the earth. We know we have workforce needs. We know we have workforce needs. So why not come together on that? Think about all the time we spend arguing with folks about citizenship for folks who came here illegally. I don't even know why we talk about that, because that's not going to happen. That's not in the cards. But what about the conversation about people who don't want to be citizens? They don't want to be involved in our political process. What they want to do is to fill a job that we need filled. So let's have a conversation. What jobs do we need filled? Well, anybody raising their children so that they can be the best carrot pickers that South Georgia has ever seen? Who's raising? Sir, are any of your 10 kids going to do the carrot picking?
If they get paid a wage worth it, then I'll say yes.
We need engineers. I need them focused on engineering, need them focused on sciences. But for Pete's sakes, this is not a divisive issue. If there hasn't been one day in anyone's memory in this country where we've been able to run our American economy without migrant workers, then let's figure out what that number is. Is it 10 workers? Is it 10,000 workers? Is it 10 million workers? It's just a number once we decide we're going to solve it and put it behind us. These are bills that have passed out of the Republican House, out of committee. Haven't moved across the floor, haven't gone to the Senate, but they've passed out of committee. Border Security Results Act, right? So far, border security means calling up the administration saying, is the border secure? And they say yes. And that's the extent of the border security conversation. We've got to have some real metrics down there. Are any of you all following what's happening with children down there on the border? It is a humanitarian crisis. And it is a crisis for one reason and one reason only, and that's all the hot air that Sherry referenced earlier that comes out of people's mouths in Washington, D.C. The only reason, it's interesting, if you look at the numbers of children from Mexico haven't changed. Haven't changed. Number of children from Mexico is still the biggest number, but hasn't changed over the past 4 years, still in the same narrow range. My church does a lot of mission work in Honduras, so I follow Honduras closely. 2011, before people in Washington started talking about that DECA program, the Deferred Action for Children that the president implemented with his phone and his pen, before he started talking about that, 900 children from Honduras were detained at the border, minors traveling alone. Still a tragedy. This year, 8 months into the year that we're counting, it's risen from 900 for a full year in 2011 to over 13,000. Now, I want you to ask yourself why that happens. The number from Mexico stays the same. It's because communication between the U.S. and Mexico, very, very thorough, lots of families traveling back and forth, good communication routes. But you see that, take your pick, whichever newspaper you trust, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, anybody you want to visit with, they're going down, they're interviewing these families in Central America, and these families are saying, you know what, I heard that if I sent my kid there, that it would get me a special privilege. I heard that what's happening is, if you have a child there, they're going to make your child a citizen. I heard that maybe if I can bring my child here, right now I'm here alone, but if I bring my child in, it will help my status in some way. None of that's true. We all know none of that's true. But the rumor mill, because policymakers are talking about things, has driven unaccompanied minors across the border, twice as many this year as last year, and we're only 8 months into the calendar year. It is a crisis. Nothing good happens from turning over your 12-year-old daughters and having someone try to traffic them across the border. We put real metrics in place to deal with that. And the Skills Act and the Ag Act, the top the top 1% of Chinese engineers, the top 1% of Chinese engineers outnumber all of America's engineers combined, right? Graduating from college today. If you put China's top 1% up against our entire class, there are more of them. And so we do have a skills crisis in this country. How is it we're going to compete in the next generation? Because barring lots of procreation, we don't have the numbers to make it work. Ask your friends in Russia about what it looks like to have your population start going into decline. Same thing in Japan. They're struggling through that. So there are some talents and some skills that we want here, right? Thank goodness in World War II, all the nuclear physicists from Germany decided they wanted to flee Germany and come here, right? They could have fled here. They could have fled Germany and gone to Japan. They could have gone to Russia. Thank goodness folks want to bring their big brain and their big ideas here. That is not a burden of this country. That is a benefit of this country. And I don't want that to ever stop. Right now, our immigration law says if you just want to bring your derelict brother into the country, assuming your derelict brother doesn't have a felony on his record, he's going to get a number and he's going to get in. He may have absolutely nothing to offer this country whatsoever, but our immigration policy says if he's your brother, we ought to make a pathway for him. Well, what if he's not your brother, but what if he's a 100 patent holding chemical engineer slash computer science guru who's going to turn the next page on technology in the world? Shouldn't we make a place for him too? Shouldn't we make a place for him too? And the answer is, of course, we should. We've done these things in the House, and I say that to you because we shouldn't have to feel bad about what we're doing. But the question that should always be asked is never what's good for immigrants, and is always what's good for America. Because I promise you, if we ask the what's good for America question, we're going to take care of a bundle of our immigration crises. Because again, getting carrots out of the field in South Georgia, that's good for America. Keeping a border secure from drug smugglers and arms dealers, that's good for America. On and on. Sherry, go one more. I just want to walk you through what doesn't work. This is the money we've been spending on border security. $6.2 billion in President Bush's day. We doubled it in President Bush's tenure. It's up another 50%. Now the Senate immigration deal says let's throw even more money at border security. Throwing money at border security is not the answer. It's not lack of money. It's lack of commitment. It's lack of process. It's lack of dozens of things long before it is a lack of money. Do not be fooled when folks say we're just going to spend more money on the problem, that's going to make it better. If there's ever a room of folks who will not be fooled by that rhetoric, it is this room. But it is what the Senate is using to say we're taking this problem seriously. They're not taking it seriously. Sheriff, go one more. Cesar Vargas, you're not going to know his name, but he's one of the most radical leftists on the immigration front. And what this article is going to say that you can't see from where you're sitting unless your eyes have already been corrected by your local LASIK physician is that we need to stop this conversation about citizenship. We need to stop it. Stop it. It's not a productive conversation. We have 100 other things that we should be talking about first. You need to get out of the citizenship conversation. Sherry, go one more. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with border control, a streamlined immigration process. I work cases for people who have been waiting since the 1980s to get their family members here. Now, I don't care how big your heart is, and I don't care how big your heart goes out to folks who are already right here in our communities. If I ask a class of kids, they get it right away. What's more just? Where does justice lie? Solving the problem for folks who didn't follow the rules first, or solving the problems for folks who tried to do everything right and have been trying to do everything right for decades. And it does not matter whether those children are here legally or not. They know what justice requires, and justice requires that folks who tried to do it the right way get some help. Get some help. Streamlined process, improved enforcement, visa and guest worker program, citizenship for undocumented immigrants. I put these on a continuum, and I did it for this reason. Sherry, drive on. 80% of Americans. These are random polls here. You could get a poll of your own, but the variances are pretty close. 80% of Americans say border control should be a priority. We should get to work on that together. That's not a Republican issue. It's not a Tea Party issue. It's not a Democratic issue. It's an American issue. We ought to be able to do that. President ought to be our partner in that. Sherry, go one more. Streamlined process. 79% of Americans say yes. 20 years is too long to wait. If you don't want somebody here, tell them no. But tying up their family in knots and fees and bills for 20 years borders on immoral. We can do better. Go one more. Improved enforcement. You know, it's against the rules to come over the border illegally. If we give you a visa and you promise to leave in 3 months and don't, that's not a crime at all. I don't know if you follow that. Overstaying your visa, which accounts for about 40% of the folks who are here, not a crime. We say we've got to have improved enforcement. Go through your list of terrorists. I'm certainly not making that generalization, but it happens to be true that if you think about all the folks who have wrought their fury on this country, they weren't folks who came here illegally. They were folks who came here legally and stayed. I want you to go through your list. Go through your list of top 10 bad guys out there. They're folks that we allowed in the country legally. We lost track of them once they got here. This is a 72% issue. We ought to be able to do better. Visa and guest worker program. 64% issue today. It goes higher when the economy is better, right? Because right now, right, you're a parent. You're thinking, for Pete's sakes, my son can't find a job. I'm not remotely interested in anybody else's employment issues until I get my family sorted out. That's exactly the right attitude to have. We do have to take care of citizens first. When it turns out that the economy is growing in a way that you have to hide under a rock to avoid getting a job, this number goes through the roof. Right now, if you split it between engineering professions and ag professions, you'd see a high number for ag, low number for engineers, because folks are saying, golly, I want my son or daughter to get that next engineering job. Why do we need to let folks in for that? So you saw 80s, you saw high 70s, now you're seeing 60s. Go to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. It's below 50%. It's below 50%. And the left has finally said, listen, why are we having this conversation? What I would encourage you to do is listen to who is having that conversation. And I would tell you the folks who are beating that drum are the people who would rather argue about something and solve any problems whatsoever. They're people who believe that it provides an electoral advantage if you focus here and paint conservatives as a do-nothing group of folks. This is the entire continuum of immigration issues. We've got majority issues for Americans across the bulk of them. I want to move forward on those things. Whatever your frustration is, I'm sure it's very similar to mine, and if we do nothing, everything that makes us angry today persists to tomorrow. I don't want to be angry. I want to be a problem solver. And we have problems that we can solve, and they're not divisive issues, they're unity issues. I want us to get together and do those. And finally, Sherry, and then we'll go right there. Passed on a voice vote, our border security bill, voice vote out of the Homeland Security Committee. It is a bipartisan issue. Legal immigration for folks in high-skilled categories passed the House 389 to 15. Yes, ma'am.
Do you think that maybe the next time the Republican leadership gets in front of the press, you could give them some notes? Because you laid it out, you were very articulate, you didn't over-talk it. It's very frustrating that, folks can't get in front of the media and have a concise, clear message that paints the real picture, given that, we've got the odds stacked against us that it's going to get out there anyway.
Speaker of the House, John Boehner, Ohio, blue state. Eric Cantor, former majority leader now, Virginia, practically blue state. Next in line, Kevin McCarthy, majority whip, California, blue state. After him, Chief Deputy Whip Peter Roskam, Illinois, blue state. After him, Kathy McMorris Rogers, Washington State, blue state. After her, we have Virginia Fox out of North Carolina. So we eventually get around to someone whose constituency starts to look something like our constituency, or who even North Carolina, can we even call that a red state any longer, right? It's in transition. So the leadership is not focused on places like Forsyth County, which turns out more conservative votes as a percentage of its population than any other county in the state of Georgia, right? We're strange. Folks are worried because they're afraid. They're afraid of offending someone.
Well, doesn't it make sense, though, that supporting common sense, there's probably a lot of Americans on both sides that would agree with what you just said. The prevent defense doesn't usually prevent anything.
You're exactly right. And yet, it is a major, we'll say conversation, rather than argument or fight or whatever. It's a major conversation we're having right now. A lot of folks say, let's just run on how bad Obamacare is, right? We don't actually need any good ideas of our own. We don't need any solutions of our own. The other guy is so bad, why don't we just talk about that instead? I don't know who that inspires. It may be true. It may be true, but for Pete's sakes, that's not who conservative voters are. It shouldn't be who conservative elected officials are. I agree with you, 100%. But we're one of the major efforts. It's going to start, I would imagine, on Thursday when we have leadership elections to fill these gaps. There's a major push across the South, since that's where most conservative members of Congress are, to replace some members of leadership from all of these blue states with members of leadership in red states who understand the world in the same way that you understand it. I'll go on to everybody else's question, but I have one final slide because it's just so important to that common sense issue. Again, you can't read this. It's for my notes, not yours. But this is a list of bills. It's a small handful, about a dozen here, that passed the House 360 or more. With 360 or more votes. That's 80% of the House or more. This is that hyper-partisan Republican House, the one that can't get anything done, they just bicker with each other. These are bills that passed with 80% of the vote or more. Veterans Economic Opportunity Act, unanimous. Success and Opportunity through Charter Quality Schools Act, 360 to 45. Hire More Heroes Act, 406 to 1. Ukraine Support Act, 319 to 99. Capital Access for Small Community Financial Institutions, 395 to 0. The SAVE Act for preventing sex trafficking among minors, 399 to 19. GI Bill Tuition Fairness Act, Department of Veterans Affairs Management Accountability Act. This is the one that allows us to fire union bosses who aren't serving our veterans properly. 390 to 33. Nuclear Iran Proliferation Act, 400 to 20. The reason I put these up here, and it's just a small handful, these are bills that 80% of the hyper-partisan House passed. You may know Doug Collins, those of you who are not my boss. Doug is your boss. Third most conservative district in the entire nation. Third most conservative district. 85% of voters voted for Mitt Romney. Go north to Jose Canseco's district in New York City. 97% of those voters voted for Barack Obama. Not once, but twice. 97%. Imagine a district of 800,000 people where 97% of them vote for Barack Obama. This is the hyper-partisan House. These are things that are passing with 80% majorities, and they have never seen the light of day in the United States Senate, nor will they. When you talk about where it is that we need to be effective, I know you've got gripes about the U.S. House. I've got gripes about the U.S. House. But I tell you, my gripes about the U.S. House pale in comparison to my gripes about the United States Senate. We will take that Senate, I believe, in November, not because we're going to be able to do amazing things like repeal Obamacare, right? If we get it out of the Senate with 60 votes, you think the president's going to sign it? No. He's going to veto it. Do I have the votes to override his veto? No. Will I go through that exercise anyway? I sure hope so, because the American people can't tell that we believe anything at all. Because things that we believe, even things that are common sense that we believe, can't get to the president's desk for a signature. This Hire More Heroes Act. Hire More Heroes Act.
Who's the one?
406 to 1. It was Jerry Nadler out of New York. 406 to 1. And what it said is, if you're an employer and you're bumping up against your 50 employee cap and you don't want to get thrown into that morass that is Obamacare regulation, but you're hiring returning veterans, which are the most unemployed segment of the population, if you're doing that, we're not going to count that against your Obamacare cap. Hire all the veterans you want to. You can do it without worrying about the negative impact it's going to have on all of your other employees. 406 to 1. Let's put veterans first. If the only thing keeping them from having a job is a federal law, let's make a pathway around that. Never going to see the light of day in the Senate, because the theory is if we show any cracks at all, the whole house of cards is going to come down, they would say. Give me a United States Senate in the hands of Republicans. It won't be in the hands of conservatives, let's just be clear. It's going to be in the hands of Republicans. Not enough votes over there for it to be a conservative Senate. But we can put this bill on the president's desk, and I'll bet you that he signs it. President Obama is a pretty good follower. He's pretty good at it. Pretty good at it. If we can put some common sense, middle of the road ideas on his desk, moving the needle in our direction, it is the biggest fear the liberal left has, is that he's going to be a good follower. I hate talking about the next election. Oh, if only we can get past one more election, we'll finally show some leadership. Oh, if only we can get past one more election. I hate that. But we have it in our grasps, our American grasps, to make these kinds of things, not just conversation pieces, but things that make a difference in people's lives. Because the same reason you're out here on a Monday evening is the same reason I ran for Congress. It's not because you're looking for an extra social club. It's because you have some real concerns and some real hope, and you want to be one of those folks who makes a difference. We have been making a difference, you and I together. We can make an even bigger difference. What's on anybody's mind? Sir, since you're visiting with us tonight, since we're trying to sell you, I'm going to work on this, Sherry. Don't worry about a thing. I'm right here.
Well, I have a few things.
Yes, sir.
Okay. But you mentioned, as you were going through that list of immigration or non-immigration, but economic issues, that certain statements that might be made by our leadership could be and will be deemed offensive. So we don't make those statements. I believe firmly that we lose the debate because we don't have any leaders who will stand up and articulate our side and finish the statement by stating, and if you're offended, I'm happy for you, okay? Because we're offended by all of these, okay? And I'll give you an example, okay? I work for a federal government agency, an agency of the executive branch of government, okay? And I am pummeled every day by solicitations from the chairman's office, by my local regional office, to participate in the LGBT celebration, okay? And I am so offended that I have to watch my money, because I'm a taxpayer, all the people in this office money, being told, come and watch us how we celebrate LGBT things, okay? I'm offended by that. I have no voice to articulate back that, okay? So, I don't go. Most of us don't go in my office. I work in the Atlanta office. But the headquarters keeps sending out solicitations, surveys. Please participate in the survey so we can find out how to address and how to better serve our LGBT employee population. What about me? I'm a none of the above, okay? Can I have some advocacy for me as a none of the above? Because I don't fit into any of those categories, okay? And that's just a minor thing. That's not even important to what is on the mind of the people here, but that's symptomatic of the fact that we have no one to articulate our position.
Let me tie that back in a couple of different ways. Number one, remember our good friend Newt Gingrich, right?
Mm-hmm.
Led Republicans out of the wilderness in Congress. First time we had a Republican majority in 60 years. He lasted for 4 years before Republicans in the House said, we think you've turned into a big squish, we've got to get rid of you. 4 years his people turned on him and tossed him out of the leadership of the United States House. He was the best articulator of conservative values we have ever known. And if you go back and look at speakers historically, they're really never any good at that. That's not supposed to be their talent. We got spoiled by the fact that the first speaker we ever had was so good, but our sights were even so much higher than him, we tossed him out to go on to something bigger and better.
But maybe we need 3 or 4 or 5 leaders willing to sacrifice their lifetime employment as an elected politician to get that message out. Okay, I fired my television because I can't stand looking at that stuff anymore. Okay, but if you look in the newspaper or hear something on the radio, some guy like Chuck Schumer is always out there spewing his offensive lies. All right, and if it's not him, it's a dozen others. Nancy Pelosi gets out there and says the idiotic things that she says that are so nonsensical that anyone with an IQ of above 80.
Let me give you the good news for that.
And she goes on and on and on, and our side stays there. Now, John Boehner may be a good man, but he can't articulate his way out of this tissue box.
Nor would he tell you that was his job as Speaker, right? Until
Well,
Newt
we
Gingrich,
need to
that
have
wasn't
somebody-
the job as Speaker.
We
It
need
is
somebody who, I'm sorry to interrupt you, sir, but
You're not sorry. You're feeling it right here. It's coming
we
from the
need
heart.
somebody to articulate our side.
Whose job is?
Here, listen to the good news.
I'll do it.
If you think Washington is full of followers, what better time to be part of the board of directors of the United States of America and be a leader, right? It's interesting, and I don't actually get it. I don't get the logic of it. Folks will say, we have these people up here and they just want to keep their job, and if they don't do what I tell them to do, I'm going to fire them. Well, those things ought to be one and the same, right? If you're going to fire the people who don't do what you tell them to do, then if they really only want to keep their job, they ought to be doing what you tell them to do. So either you don't speak for the majority, right, because the majority keeps sending them back, or there's some other disconnect going on there. And who considers themselves a social conservative in this room? Social conservative. All right. Now, who among you social conservatives have a socially liberal friend that you're pretty sure you're going to be able to convince to become a social conservative? Who believes they're going to be able to do that? You think you got one out there that you can persuade? I have none.
It's going to take a while.
So going back to immigration here, if we're going to grow the number of social conservatives, because I would argue we might, if we haven't lost our social conservative majority, we're getting pretty close. If we're not going to convert our liberal friends to be social conservatives, where are we going to find social conservatives to help lead the policies of this country? Where are we going to find them?
We got to grow them in the schools like we used to.
I go to every school in this district, and every single high school I go to, somewhere in that hour of questions, someone asks me what I'm going to do for the LGBT community and why aren't I working harder for them. I don't know that we're growing them in our schools.
No,
So.
we have to change the curriculum in order to get back to the basic American values, because the curriculum has been corrupted to where you are asked that question because there's no frame of reference as to should there be another side? Should there be a debate about the issue?
My answer is that I'm not opposed to hate crimes, I'm opposed to crimes. I'm not opposed to folks not being able to exercise their specific freedoms. I'm opposed to people not being able to exercise their freedoms, period. I'm not concerned about your rights. I'm concerned about our rights. And that we're all in this together. And freedom ought to get us all what we want. I will say this, and I hope you'll take it in the loving sense in which it is intended. So often, we know we're right about values conversations. And so we try to go to Washington and pass our values through the Congress. I tell you, on any issue that we can pass our values through the Congress today, they will trump us with their values through the Congress tomorrow. We can win fights in Georgia. We cannot win in Washington, D.C. And so I would encourage us to lead from here. Lead by making, because most social issues are the purview of the state, right? Marriage, state issue. Abortion, state issue. Guns, state issue. The list goes on and on and on. All state issues. We can lead and show what a good community can look like if we try to get the federal government's nose under the tent by telling folks what the right answer is. I promise you, it's only a matter of time before they beat us and take what we crafted to do something good and turn it into something ugly instead. Immigration is an opportunity to grow social conservatives. You have to decide for yourself whether or not that's the road that you want to go. But if we can't create more social conservatives, if you're not gonna, we don't have our school board candidates here tonight, but if we're not gonna grow more social conservatives, we gotta find them somewhere. I posit to you that so many immigrant families believe everything that you and I believe about what freedom and opportunity means, as well as what faith and family means. Sir?
I'm interested in how you keep your enthusiasm when you see things beginning with the guns, Fast and Furious, and the IRS, and the NSA, and the foreign policy that has got to be the biggest disaster this country's ever seen. And whatever this administration wants to do, they do. And nobody is doing anything except talking about it for 6 weeks in the newspaper and on Fox, and because the others don't talk about it. And then it goes away to something else. It's the most discouraging situation. I don't know how you get up to the work anymore. I think if I were you, I'd just say, hell with it, go back to doing whatever you were doing before.
I'm gonna give you the good news. Yes, this president can do absolutely anything that he wants to do, and our founding fathers anticipated exactly that. There is no tool in this document for restraining the Article II president except for passing a bill through the Article I Congress or winning a case in the Article III courts. In the absence of those two measures, executive power is unrestrained, and they counted on us to sort that out. We are complicit. We are complicit. I get calls every day. It makes me, I don't know if it makes me angry, it makes me sad, from folks who say, Rob, I can't believe you let the president sign this executive order. I can't believe you did. You know, number one, I didn't have a say in that. Number two, President Bush signed the same executive order 3 times. Well, that was different because it was President Bush and I believed in it, right? It was different then. We did not hold President Bush to the same standards to which we want to hold President Obama. It's on us. It's on us. And it was a Republican Congress that was protecting George Bush, right? It's a time of war. I want to support the president for Pete's sakes. You cannot support your party. You cannot support your president. You must first support your Constitution, because it is the only thing that protects you when things go sideways. And today, Harry Reid would rather protect the president than protect the Constitution. I want you to watch, Sherry heard me say it the other night, I want you to watch Dianne Feinstein out of California. Don't ask me if I've lost my mind telling you to look to Dianne Feinstein to protect your liberties and your freedoms. But no one in the Senate was angrier about the president signing the National Defense Authorization Act 3 weeks earlier and saying, I will consult with the Congress before I release any prisoners from Guantanamo Bay, only to have it show up in the headlines before she heard it from him. Outraged. But who are those giants today? Right? Dianne Feinstein is not the one you think of, but she's playing that role. Robert Byrd from West Virginia used to be one of those folks who said, over my dead body will you steal the people's power from the Article I Congress. Daniel Patrick Moynihan, another Democrat in New York, over my dead body will I let power flow down Pennsylvania to the all-powerful executive. This whole document is about people being frightened of an all-powerful executive, and we have prioritized party before country.
Today?
Where are those people today? I'm going to give you an example, and it's one you're not going to like. But I've committed myself to solving this. You ask what gets me up every morning? It's that I can do a little something every day. It's like running an election. Sherry knows this better than anybody coming fresh off the campaign trail. You don't have any idea what you're doing that works. You don't have any idea. But you do it all, right? You get up early, you stay out late, you do it all, because you never know what that one thing is going to be that starts to make the difference. We had an appropriations bill come to the floor. Commerce, Justice, Science bill, funds the Justice Department. And there was an amendment offered by a Democrat in California that said, I want to raise the amount of money that we allow for block grants to states to put their data in the firearms background check system, the NICS system, I want to raise that pot of money that we allow states to use by $20 million, and I want to take it out of salaries and other things from the Justice Department. I was the only Republican in Georgia who voted yes. And my regret is not that I voted yes. My regret is that I didn't spend more time working on my Republican colleagues, because here's the thing. Not one person in this room contacted me to say, Rob, the background check system is bad and we need to abolish that law. You shouldn't have to have any background checks, period. Nobody contacted me to say that. Nobody contacted me to say, Rob, the background check system is bad and we need to repeal it, but we can't repeal it because the president won't work with us, so we need to zero it out. Make sure it doesn't get a single penny whatsoever because it's bad and it's wrong. Nobody contacted me to say that. After I voted yes for $20 million in block grants to states so that they could put their backlogs in, I got calls from all sorts of folks. Oh, Rob, I can't believe you're supporting the Obamacare, the Obama anti-gun agenda. Can't believe you're signing up with those guys. It's the law of the land that those records go into a single check system that is used for firearms purchase across the country. If we don't like the law, we should repeal it, we should change it, but ignoring it makes us no better than them. Every time I see an opportunity for a cause that Republicans, conservatives might say, you know what, that's one of those laws we don't like, let's just ignore that one, I'm standing up and saying no. Because we can't win Harry Reid overnight. We can't win Dianne Feinstein overnight. But what we can do is be seen as the men and women of principle that we are. And there are men and women of principle on that side too, who know that the future of this country is not threatened by which political party is in control. It's threatened if political parties are in control more than this document is in control.
What's the guy's name on the other side? Who's that one guy?
Which one, guy?
On the Democratic side, that's worried about that.
Oh, golly. Well, like I say, look at what Dianne Feinstein has said just in the past couple of weeks, and the list goes longer than that.
Personal affront.
It is, if you believe that all these people who have these jobs are power hungry, politician for life kinds of folks, you got to believe they want to stay strong. And you can't let your power trickle downhill to the White House and stay strong. So whether they're doing it for America or whether they're doing it out of self-interest, we ought to be going in the same. We ought to be going in the same direction. But that's what we can do. Find those things that are hard, that you wish the law said something different, but it doesn't, and you choose, unlike the president, to follow the law until such time as we change the law. Right?
I can appreciate positive talk, and I can appreciate the power of positive thinking in all this, but please understand that from me, you have my authority to get angry with these people in Washington. You have every right with the people here using their authority to tell the people in Washington and to go to the press and go stand on the top step of the Capitol and crow like a rooster if you need to, decrying what our president is doing. Not only in this country, letting all of these, he's bringing all of these immigrants in and then stockpiling them in military bases. You have every right to stand up there and decry that. You have every right to decry against this president using Al-Qaeda as a military mercenary organization to take down governments such as in Libya and attempting to take them down in Syria. And then now, using that same pattern, mysteriously, the same thing's happening in Iraq. And none of this comes out. I don't hear anybody in Congress talking about this. I don't hear anybody in the news talking about this. But it's the exact same pattern. And I know that your office understands that there is a relationship between our president and Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood, because they have admitted that to me. I spoke with your office a year ago or so about that. And then they confirmed back to me that yes, that there is a relationship there. And then I go and talk with your office about 6 months or so ago, wanting to know, well, what's happening on this? And what they tell me is, well, that's the executive branch, and we don't have any control over the executive branch. I know you don't have any control over the executive branch, but you have perfect control over your mouth. You have perfect control of being able to stand up and decry all of these things that the president is doing, and you have the power to write op-eds in the New York Times, or at least in the Forsyth County News, or the Gwinnett Daily, or whatever it is. You have that power to be able to convey all of that information to people who don't know that because they're just living their lives. So I excuse my frustration, but not everything is so positive about Washington. And I want to see you going after these people, hook, line, and sinker, and I want to see you stamping up and down, whatever you have to do to convey to these people that they are not only not following that document right there, but they ought to be in jail.
Yes.
Let me use this as the case study. I don't know how many of you know Hank well. How many of you think that was Hank angry? See, not a one. Not a one. Because you know, if you're going to affect change, you know if you're going to change my mind, you know if we're going to be partners in making a difference, you've got to contain that anger. Jabbing a sharp stick in my eye might make you feel better, but it won't serve the goals that you were trying to communicate to me. The same thing is true on Capitol Hill. Who do you think the most conservative man or woman in Congress is? Choose one. Who do you think it is? We could go in a number. Who's doing what Hank wants done and doing it well? Who's doing that? Trey Gowdy's doing it well. Trey Gowdy's awesome. Trey Gowdy's awesome.
Jordan from Ohio.
Jim Jordan doing it great. Jordan's doing it great. Who on the Senate side? Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz. Oh, look at that big old smile for Ted. I'm telling you, I was down in Forsyth County. Big old smile.
Rand Paul.
Rand Paul. Mike Lee. A lot of those guys active, last time we had the government, the debt ceiling issue, those guys were front and center, just like Hank is saying. Now, who among those folks that you just mentioned has introduced a budget that balances? Everybody that was mentioned there has something to say about why we should never raise the debt ceiling again, and they say it loudly and proudly on every television station that'll listen. Which of those conservative heroes that we have just mentioned has introduced a budget that ever balances?
The one that's on the committee to do that. I'm assuming none of them were on the committee.
Oh no, they're absolutely on the committee. But anybody can introduce a budget. Oh yeah, anybody can introduce a budget. And to Hank's point, right, it doesn't matter that I'm not on the Foreign Affairs Committee that handles any of those jurisdictions. He wants me involved in those issues. But I'm going to answer that question for you, and the answer is me. The most conservative budget introduced in the entire city of Washington, I drafted on your behalf. And we've done that twice now. First time we only got 100 votes on it. The second time we got 133 votes on it. We're growing that vote. It's okay with me if folks believe Ted Cruz is the most conservative voice in Washington. It's okay if when folks think about solving the debt crisis, they think of Ted Cruz. It does not matter to me. What matters to me is that we solve the debt crisis. And solving it and being loud about it have absolutely nothing to do with one another. We have folks, and Trey Gowdy's a good one. Trey Gowdy's a good one, right? He's not mean, he's not arrogant, he's exactly assertive as you talk about, and that is his talent, and he's good at it. We've got to have folks who do that, and I applaud the folks who do, but we've also got to have folks who are doing the work that makes all those words turn into legislative language and get something done.
I'm not saying you're not working.
I know you're not. No. I'm saying,
that at all.
but that's the answer to your question, is that what you want is someone who is louder. And what I have experienced is that being louder and being effective are not related, and sometimes are inversely related. And so I choose a different path. It's not an accident. It's a choice.
I understand that. At the same time, we're getting, drawing up balanced budgets, we have a Federal Reserve who is expanding the money supply by many more billions of dollars that you're talking about saving right here, and concentrating that money in the hand of the bankers on Wall Street, and they're doing nothing but pumping up the stock market with it while they're impoverishing all the people in your district.
And as you and I have discussed, which member of Congress has talked about the Federal Reserve and the challenges that it poses more than any other member on Capitol Hill?
Paul Brown.
No. You. Me. You knew where I was going with that, didn't you? You sensed my pattern. Right. And I just say to you, again, We all have different talents and we all have different
Yeah.
skill sets. I need to bring people onto the bandwagon, right? I live in a district where folks are already inspired, right? I live in a district where folks already get it. My opportunity with your voting card is not to go up there and be as vocally read as we are, because I'm not going to change anybody's mind. Folks already know what they believe when they show up in there. My opportunity is to come from a place where opportunity and freedom exist and try to find folks for whom opportunity and freedom is dead and show them how it is we can build it there. There's no more diverse district represented by a Republican anywhere coast to coast. More diverse than this district right here. This one, ours. And it is an amazing opportunity that we have because we have credibility to change people's minds that other folks don't have a chance to change.
I'll shut up.
Mr. Sullivan, I'm sorry, I'm going to ask you to shut up quickly, because we only have time for one more question, and I want to be sure that we have one more opportunity for one more person to be heard. I'm sorry, I hate to be rude, but I want him to have one more person that he can call on, because that's all we have with your time.
I was looking to your first new guest to see if anybody had a question. Then this gentleman, I had my bottom in his face for the first 10, 15 minutes I was talking, so I feel like I owe you a debt. I also feel like we've gotten to know each other a little bit better than we planned.
The Reverend has got a question.
He's had his hand up really good.
Reverend Bean and I visit with each other on a near daily basis. I didn't even know his name. John. Thank you, John.
I was at a town hall meeting one time, and you were at. It's the last one I went to.
Okay. Where were we?
So it was in the administrative building.
Okay.
And you were on a topic of death panels with Obamacare.
Okay.
A Democrat heckler stood up and claimed that Governor Palin was lying about death panels, even though, and you went and you said, and you catered to his nonsense. And even though Howard Dean and Democrats have openly stated, Obama himself stated that she was right about death panels. And people want to talk about having a strong national leader, it is her. And the reason why, on the national level at least, because she doesn't have to have a public office, she doesn't have to answer anyone. She was going to Facebook before it was cool, before Gingrich was, who said he'd pick her as a running mate. She's been effective on this message of death panels or whatever, on a conservative message. And how do you benefit? How do you conserve movement by distancing yourself from her?
It's an easy one. It's because she's not right. She's not right. And I'll tell you.
Why did Howard Dean say it was right, that she was right?
If you get me in the business of trying to defend Howard Dean, we're going to be here
So
for a long time.
why would
right?
Howard Dean have meant something that was bad for his party? That she was right on.
I wouldn't concede that he did. I mean, I take your word for it because you tell me it's true.
Well, you said it.
I've never heard him. I've never heard that characterization.
said
But you know what a death panel is, right? What's the real legislative term for a death panel?
You don't get into political speak.
I'm not political speak. I'm saying
I know,
what
it
agency
doesn't
is it?
say expect death panels in it.
No, it's a serious question. I know all about these panels. I know all about them. I know exactly what they do, and I'm opposed to them. I'm opposed to them. But they're not a panel that chooses for people to die. It is a great talking point, right? Why do I call the inheritance tax the death tax, right? You're not being penalized for being dead. You're being penalized for being wealthy, right? That's what the inheritance tax is. But we call it the death tax because it connotes more passion.
Well, it's
these panels.
Okay, it states that when someone's too costly to live,
No, sir.
then they're not going to.
It's not.
This is what happens in Canada,
that's
and he denied that too.
That's patently false. That is not what these panels do. Now again, and I would say to you that this is a challenge we face as conservatives, right? It's going to look like we disagree. I agree with you 100%, except what the words are we ought to be using to describe this challenge. You want to get out there and inspire conservatives, and death panels is the right way to do it. I don't question that at all. I want to get out there and communicate with Democrats and get them to help me repeal it. And death panels is not the right
Well, you
way
need to
to
explain
get them
why
to
their
help
side
me
is
to
wrong,
repeal it.
why their position's bad, and then just explain, then explain why our position's good, which is exactly what Governor Palin was doing. If you read the note, did you ever read her note?
Read her what?
Her Facebook know what she was talking about.
No, I don't.
Okay, I think you need to, because you knew how to understand what she was saying.
I understand exactly what a death panel is, and I don't fault her for saying it. What I'm
She
saying
didn't
is,
misunderstood. She
it's
was
a
right.
rhetorical tool, and that's not what these panels do. But I want you to internalize. I want you to internalize this, because it just couldn't be more important. I want you to look at this look of sadness and despair here, or perhaps frustration and anger, right?
No.
What characterize it for me?
How do we benefit as a movement by just distancing ourselves from other leaders and catering to the media like that? You know,
It's not catering to the media, it's catering to what is actually true, right? That we can characterize things 1,000 different ways, and folks do, right? There are going to be people who say things that are mischaracterizing things to the benefit of the left, and folks who mischaracterize things to the benefit of the right. I think we got lots of those folks already. I don't think you need that from me. I was not at all disrespectful for Governor Palin, and I have great respect for Governor Palin. She made that choice, and she knew exactly what she was doing when she made it, and she's never backed off of it 1 minute. But the answer to why I don't use that language and to why I said what I said to that protester, because the protester's point was, and we do this to ourselves as Republicans, we've got an amazing case. We have an amazing case for why these panels should go away. We have an amazing case for why these panels are bad for seniors, why they're bad for America, why they're not going to save any money. Our case is rock solid. And if we want to say they are death panels, I would tell you it does nothing to buttress our already strong case. What it does do is create an argument about whether or not they're death panels. I don't know how we, as people who want this repealed, benefit from that. Right? I can tell you the fair tax is going to make everything sunshine and roses, or I can tell you what the fair tax is really going to do. And I'm in the truth business, and
I understand and appreciate that, you saying that, but it's a bill that obviously is very costly, that does not have any way to pay off how it's going to pay covering everyone. You don't think, obviously he's going to say, you know, oh, this person is too costly, if we keep them alive, we're going to throw them a sugar pill.
It does not have that power. That is not
That's
what
what
this
they say
panel
it
does. This panel
But
does
this
one
is-
thing and one thing only, and what the one thing is that it does is awful. Let's just be clear. It does one thing and one thing only, and that thing is awful. It's just not that. What the one thing and the one thing only it does is it says what Medicare is going to pay for. You're allowed to get whatever kind of care you want to, but Medicare isn't going to reimburse you for whatever procedures they decide Medicare's not going to reimburse you for. Now, your doctor under EMTALA is still required to perform them. Medicare is just not going to reimburse them for them. And yes, it was a cynical tool that the Obama administration used in order to pay for Obamacare. And similarly, again, when it comes to trying to hold everybody to the same standard, we've repealed 5 different pieces of Obamacare. All of them had to do with how the bill was going to get paid for. He's cooperated with them and signed 5 different repeal sections. All the sections he threw in there to figure out a way to pay for it, he decided to agree with us and repeal those things, which means now it goes on at the same cost but unpaid for. That is the talent of this administration, hiding the ball in that way. And all of the pay-for pieces were intentionally controversial, I would tell you, because he has no interest in paying for it. What he has an interest in doing is...
You haven't explained why Democrats like Howard Dean said she was right specifically.
Yeah,
How
again,
do we benefit from that?
Yeah, I don't know what was in it for Howard Dean, but again, I sit on the committee that's in charge of doing oversight on these issues, and I can guarantee I'm not confused about what's happening with them. We can disagree on nomenclature, but the statute is what the statute is. Again, I'm grateful to you guys for letting me come out tonight. More importantly, I'm grateful for you all for being out here tonight. You got 2 candidates with you who care enough to be out here too. I think folks who participate in the process should be rewarded for participating in the process. I hope if you hadn't got a chance to meet these 2 guys, you do get to know them. The half of you who raised your hand and said I actually am in your district, I'm not confused about who it is that I work for. Absolutely work for you. If there's ever anything that this was not the right forum to talk about what you need to talk about, call my office. We'll make an appointment. We'll sit down and go through things line by line. The very best ideas that I have come from constituents in this district because we're blessed with a bunch of doers and movers and shakers here, and I'm grateful and honored to be able to represent you in Washington. Thanks so much. And I always forget to say it, I'm on the 9:45 flight back to D.C., which is why I'm going to rush out. I hate rushing out. I'd rather stay. I like to stick around until we close the place down, as we often do, Sherry. But tonight I've got to rush out. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.